Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of The ReidOut here in Greenville, Mississippi. Tonight, we have an exclusive interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, who traveled to Greenville today to highlight the administration's investment in small businesses. Here she is, meeting the small business owner of Joyce's Embroidery Fabrics, Alterations, and Sewing, after a greeting by Congressman Benny Thompson and the mayor of Greenville, Eric Simmons. The destination, Greenville, is intentional, a town in the heart of the Mississippi Delta. It's even been called the most southern place on earth, a place that is predominantly black and where, during the height of Jim Crow, the threat of lynchings terrorized black people. So it is particularly meaningful that the first black woman vice president came here today, days after President Joe Biden signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act into law. And as small businesses in Greenville, the backbone of its economy, continue to battle a global pandemic. I got to travel with the vice president on Air Force Two, meaning I am back on the road. And just a short time ago, I sat down with Vice President Harris for a wide-ranging interview about her trip and so much more. Let's dive on in. Vice President Harris, thank you so much for doing this.
It is wonderful to be with you, Joy Reid.
Well, it is wonderful to be with you and wonderful to be in Greenville, Mississippi.
Indeed.
I'm sure you noticed as you were driving in the motorcade, all of the children with the balloons and flags all waving at the side of the road. What struck me is, first, that was wonderful, but also it does show that politicians don't come to places like this.
Yeah.
Is this something that you plan to keep doing?
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about why you're here, but does it say something about the brokenness of our politics that we skip non-swing states in an election year? Politicians just don't come to places like here.
Well, the reason I'm here is because there are people here who matter, right? And when you look at a place like Greenville, Mississippi, with a population of about 30,000 people, we're talking about families, we're talking about children, we're talking about people with aspirations and dreams for themselves, for their community, and they deserve to be seen and they deserve to be heard. And we cannot expect people to knock on our door, to have to come to us in order for us to be responsive to their needs. So I am here because this is a community in the Mississippi Delta that has a long history of being part of America's history, including having the needs that should be met, such as access to capital for small businesses, such as access to high-speed internet. And so I'm here to speak with folks and to celebrate who they are.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because we are in the midst of a crisis that has disrupted a community that really in many ways is no different than what we're familiar with here in the U.S. The Ukraine crisis is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe we're all watching happen in real time, where people with real needs and normal lives have been completely disrupted.
That's right.
Some 4 million Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes because of what Russia has decided to do. Both yourself and the president were in the region recently. Yeah. And when the president was there, he gave a speech in Warsaw that was well received by many, but he also said something that I think was received well by some, but kind of surprised others. He said that Vladimir Putin should no longer be the leader of Russia. Do you agree?
Listen, I think that you framed the point quite accurately and well, which is America's policy has been and will continue to be focused on the real issue at hand, which is, one, the needs of the Ukrainian people, which we will continue to support through humanitarian assistance, through security assistance, but also ensuring that there's going to be serious consequence for Vladimir Putin and Russian aggression as it relates to Ukraine, which is why our policy from the beginning has been about ensuring that there are going to be real costs exacted against Russia in the form of severe sanctions, which we know are having a real impact and an immediate impact, not to mention the longer-term impact, which is about saying there's going to be consequence and accountability when you commit the kinds of atrocities that he is committing. And I think the president has been an extraordinary leader. To your point, Joy, I've been to Poland. I was in Romania. I've been to Europe, I think, probably at least 3 times in the last 4 months. I was in Munich, Germany, where I gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference. I was in France before that, speaking with heads of state about this issue, among many other issues, but most recently about this issue. And I will tell you, in sitting down with prime ministers and presidents, often the first thing they would say to me is thank you to the United States and this administration for bringing us together, for building the coalition, for reinvigorating the relationship between the United States and its NATO allies, reinvigorating the relationship and the importance of the relationship to the EU in terms of an issue like Ukraine, which is ultimately about one of the most important principles that we are fighting for, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Well, I mean, on Putin specifically, I think that the world largely agrees, with very, very few exceptions, that what Putin has done has not only been destructive to Ukraine, he's destroying Ukraine utterly. There are places like Mariupol that are being wiped off the map, but he's destroyed his own country as well. He has made Russia into a lone nation, into a sort of North Korea. And the way that the world deals with countries like North Korea, countries like Cuba, is that they don't deal with them as normal nations as long as the dictator is in charge. Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, has said that sanctions should continue to be ratcheted up so long as the troops, as Russian troops, are in Ukraine. Should those sanctions continue as long as Vladimir Putin is the dictator of Russia?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about the future. I'm going to tell you where we are now. They are intact, and we will continue to upgrade them and make them so more severe as appropriate. And as far as we are concerned, everything is on the table in that regard, because we are seeing extreme atrocities. We are seeing maternity hospitals being bombed. We're seeing a location that was so clearly designated as being a shelter, a place of safety for children. We are seeing, to your point, millions of people being displaced, potentially permanently, in a war that was instigated, unprovoked, unjustified, against a whole population of people. So yeah, the sanctions are going to be severe, and they will last as long as these atrocities and this aggression is continuing.
So no luck on getting you to weigh in on whether he should remain.
Well, no. Listen. Let me be very clear. Yeah. Let me be very clear. We are not into regime change, and that is not our policy. Yeah. Period.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our democracy here, because we're struggling with our democracy as well.
Yes.
As we all know, there was an insurrection, an attempted coup. I don't think there's any other way to describe it, that took place last year. And as we get more information about what happened and who was behind it, we're finding out there were members of Congress who were complicit. There were United States senators. You're the president of the Senate as vice president of the United States. What do you think should be the consequences for people like Ted Cruz, people like Josh Hawley, who are now being named as we learn more about those who were actually putting together the plan to overthrow our election?
I think that what is very much at stake, I'm going to just make the connection first to the previous discussion in this one. You are absolutely spot on from my perspective that this is about our democracy and an attempt to weaken the strength of it, but also the legitimacy of it. And there are foreign actors that try and do it, and then we have domestic threats. And that's part of what we witnessed on January 6th. And there needs to be, of course, consequence for that. So that is occurring in terms of the process that is about seeking the evidence about what actually happened and who are the bad actors, because, of course, yes, they should pay a consequence. There should be accountability. In terms of elected leaders, to the extent that they were complicit in a crime, of course, there should be some kind of response to that. But also there should be, I think, a continuing discussion about the fact that what happened on January 6th was a concerted attempt to undermine the integrity of our elections system, to suggest that in any way it lacked legitimacy. And that plays right into the hands of all of those who would attempt to say America does not live its principles. And we have to all stand up and be clear that, no, that does not reflect the majority of us. The majority of us believe in free and fair elections. The majority of us believe in the integrity of this process. The majority of us will fight for attacks against it, which are both as it relates to what happened on January 6th, but also what is happening around the country in terms of legislation that is being passed to make it more difficult for people to vote. All of that needs to happen.